Hello and welcome. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to start the Airbus A310 by iniBuilds and Asobo. After we get her started, we'll taxi out to runway and take off to the southwest, en route to Memphis. Currently we're at Louisville, Kentucky, or Kilo Sierra Delta Foxtrot. Along the way, I'll be demonstrating a few of the aspects of the A310 you should be familiar with to fly the aircraft. Finally, we will arrive into Memphis and shoot the ILS 18 left approach, which is one of the more tricky aspects of flying the A310 in the simulator. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. While I am a real-world pilot, I've never set foot on an Airbus A310. Nothing I do or say in this video should be interpreted as instructional for real-world flying. Besides the fact I'm not an airline pilot, I've never flown a jet or multi-engine aircraft, nor am I a certified flight instructor. Again, do not use this as instructional for real-world flying. Now, let's get started. Welcome on board the flight deck of the Airbus A310. To start with, we're going to go over the cockpit in general so you can kind of see where different things I'll be referencing are. So right out here in front of you is your primary flight display and your navigational display, or MFD or multifunctional display, depending on what aircraft you're flying. To the right of that is your standby instrumentation, brake system, flaps and slats, engine instrumentation, engine economy instrumentation, gear switch, and then you have, of course, on your co-pilot side. Up here in the center, this is your FCU or FCP, your flight control panel or flight control unit. This is your overhead panel, and then you have a higher side that's more of the overhead panel that we'll be referencing as well. And then we have our center console that we'll also be utilizing. And then finally, we have our EFB or our iPad. So to start with, we're going to start with our preliminary cockpit preparation. To do that, we're going to go overhead, turn on all of our batteries. Once our batteries are on in the auto position, which are indicated by these green lights showing the connection inside of these lines, we're going to check our hydraulic power and make sure they're all in the green, which they are. Next, we'll make sure that our hydraulic power systems are showing low pressures in both the engines, and our electrical pumps are showing dark, and our PTUs are showing dark. Then we'll check and make sure our wiper blades are in the off position. We don't want them going crazy right here on the ground for no reason at all. Then we'll go down to our center panel here and make sure our gear is in the down position. Likewise, if you have a gear lever on your flight controls, make sure those are actually down in real life as well. I use a Bravo Throttle Quadrant and I actually have a gear lever. So this is the time I make sure that is down is correct as well. Otherwise, you may end up in the up position. I've done it and it's not pretty. Finally, we'll make sure our slats and flaps are up and our speed brakes are also in the fully closed position or down position. Fuel lever switches should be in the off position, and then we can go ahead and establish our external power. Going back in the overhead panel, we're going to turn on our external power. We can hear the change as the air conditioning kicks on and all these other lights indicate. With that on, we can go ahead and test our APU system. Whether or not you have external power or not may vary depending on where you are. But we're going to do our agent squib test and then our loop test, A and B. And it'll indicate fire, make sure that we're having a master warning, master caution, and APU fire on the EFIS display. All right, that's been cleared. If you have to start your APU for external power, now would be the time to do that. To do that, simply all you're going to have to do is turn on your master switch, wait about 10 seconds, hit the start button, and once that's started, you can turn on your APU bleed for air conditioning. We're not going to do that today because we do have external power available. One more thing about the APU, if you do have to turn that on, you do want to turn on your left outermost pump if you have fuel in that tank. Now we're going to go further overhead panel here, and we're going to turn on our nav switches. Flip on the nav, battery operation shows, that'll go away, and it'll say align mode. We'll do the same for the center one. And same for the right one. Now with that complete, we're going to continue down our... Oops, my bad. We continue down our overhead panel and turn on our low pressure supply to crew to on, and we should see a pressurization in the green here, which is our low pressure oxygen supply. Now we'll continue on to our flight deck preparation. To start that, we're going to go down to our M.2 or FMC. And what we're going to do here is first clear that message. We'll get to that in just a second. But we first want to put in our from and our to. We're going to start with Kilo Sierra Delta Foxtrot. Then slash Kilo Mike Echo Mike. And what this shows is that we're going from Louisville and then we're going to Memphis. We'll put that in the upper right hand corner, or R1, from to, then hit return. Next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and turn on the Align IRS. We're going to select the Align IRS button, and that will put the mode of IRS into Align. And so now it's communicating between this flight computer and the IRS system to make sure the inertia reference system is going to be accurate. We'll go back overhead and we'll go ahead and turn on our seatbelts and our no smoking. We'll start now a kind of a flow system. I'm going to go ahead and turn my dome light here so a little bit more light. Inside of our flow system, we're basically going to go up and then up and then up and then up and then up. But while we're doing that, we may have to pop down to the center console or the main displays to do a couple things. So just be ready for that. So we'll start with our hydraulic. Make sure we're in the green, showing low pressure. Servo control should be also low pressure. All of these solving faults are completely fine. We do want to change flight recorder to ground control on. We want to make sure our display selection is in PPOS and system display is in number 1. Next, we'll come down to our lights. We want to make sure our nav lights are in the 1 position if you're the pilot flying. If you're the co-pilot flying or the first officer, you would switch that to the 2 position, but we'll keep it in 1 because it's just me on board today. The rest of these lights we'll keep into the off position. We're not going to be needing those just yet. We'll do those later. Anti-ice starts in off position. ATS can go on. We will not touch the pitch trim or the yaw dampener until the IRS modes have been aligned. That's a key point to keep in mind. So these stay off until the IRS has been aligned. Continuing on, we are in external power mode. No reason to touch this. Should see faults in generator 1 and 2, which are the engine generators. We'll take this opportunity to go and test engine number 1 fire, squibs, and then loop test, which again should show an indication, master warning, master caution, and fire. Back overhead panel, we want to make sure our indication of electricity is in emergency and ESS. And then we continue on, we go down to the bottom here. We're not going to be touching our wipers or our APU or engine starts at this time. What we can do though is we want to make sure our pressurization system is operational. To do that, all we got to do is make sure that both of these are showing 0. This is showing 0, vertical speed showing 0, and the cabin altitude is showing close to, doesn't have to be exact, but close to where the actual altitude is that you're currently sitting. Then we want to adjust our auto pressure rate, make sure that's in the normal position. You don't want it low, you want it right there in the normal. Next, we'll turn on our window heats and our probe heats. Then we'll continue on and we'll check our right engine or number 2 engine squib test, and then of course our loop test A and B, warning, caution, and fire. And then extinguish. Then we'll go down here and turn on our emergency exit lights to arm. And our air bleed panel. Now we don't have any air bleed coming into the aircraft right now. APU's off. We are technically receiving air from the terminal itself or an air cart if you have that as well. We're turning econ flow to on. And then we could set our temperatures as we need to. I'm going to leave them all in auto. If you want to play around with this, you sure can, but there's no real necessity to. Continuing up, I'm going to make sure our pack temps are both in the auto mode, which means they're dark, which is correct. At this point, we're going to go ahead and check our brake system. To do that, all we're going to do is go down here to the main display. This is our brake pressurization. You can see both of the brakes are showing right around probably about 2 or so 1,000 pounds of pressure PSI. Now it's because our parking brake system is on, and then you have the ACCU pressurization showing right here. Now this is below the green arc. What you have to do is go down here and press this parking brake ACCU pressure. Press and hold it for about 2 or 3 seconds. Come back up. If it's in the green arc, you're good to go. If it's not, you just keep repeating that step until it does. Now we do want to test our alternate brake system. All we have to do with that, apply our foot brakes, release the parking brake. You can see it going low and then back to normal. Parking brake back in. Alternate off. Parking brake back on. And then we can switch this back up to normal. That means our brakes are good and tested. And that's kind of important. You kind of need brakes, right? So auto brakes, I want to make sure these are all in the extinguished mode. We don't want any of those selected as of right now. We'll get to that later. Next, we'll go ahead and select our landing elevation. Landing elevation is dependent upon where you're going. So today in Memphis, we're going to be landing at... Our landing elevation in Memphis is 278 feet, so we'll get to the closest 100 here. That's 100 feet, 150, 200, 250, 300 feet. This does not have to be exact. It's just closest 100. Next, we'll test our landing gear warning test. Press hold, you'll see the master warning, and then also landing gear unsafe. And finally, make sure speed brake is retracted and disarmed. Now you'll notice that we have a message indicator and it says nav accuracy upgraded. What that means is the IRS has finished aligning. So we can go and clear that message. GPS primary, that's correct, clear that as well. And now we're going to go back overhead and turn on our pitch trims and our yaw dampeners. If you don't do that, you will not see the FCP/SPU show up, nor will you see the economy selectors show up either, which are both important. So make sure you have selected those on. So if you're not seeing those indicators on the FCP, that is why. All right, we're going to check our takeoff warnings by selecting our levers here. We're going to push the right one full all the way forward. We get the takeoff warning, the left one all the way forward. Also takeoff warning. Both are correct. Now, if at this point you would normally get your flight plan or clearance from air traffic control, in most cases you're going to be receiving a PDC or ACARS message with that clearance, in which you would put it in here. Now we're going to keep 2000 in there because there's no real reason to change it. I mean, if we want, we can just, for kicks and giggles, change it up to 2106, but it really doesn't matter because we're going to be flying offline today. Once that's done, we're going to reset our rudder trim, make sure that's zeroed out. And then we can go ahead and start working on a little bit of the calculations. So to do that, we're going to start by going to the EFB. We're going to start with our takeoff calculation. But first, we're going to select our weight and balance. And then we're going to reference our plan that we've been given by SimBrief, which is what I use. But it's up to you what you want to use. In SimBrief, it states that we have 175 passengers on board. So I'll put 175 in the passengers. If I can get it exact. Oh, come on. 175. And then next we're going to put in our cargo, which is 9.6 or 9,600, which is fairly low. And it's not exact, but it's close enough. That's what we're going for. Close enough. Fuel's going to be 23.1. 23.184. That's close enough, and we'll go and apply that to the aircraft. That means now there's that many passengers, cargo, and fuel on board. Now that we've calculated our weight, we're going to go into the FMC and finish our setup of our routes and everything like that. So we are still in initialization page. We want to go ahead and enter our cost index, which today is going to be 10. Our flight level today is going to be 340. Our flight ID today is going to be Delta Alpha Lima 910. Our cruise winds are going to be 269 at 43. Now that we've completed that, we'll move to our actual flight plan. We'll select L1 or Kilo Sierra Delta Foxtrot, upper left hand corner, and select it again to select the SID. And we're going to choose that we're going to be on, based upon the flight plan we've been given, cargo for departure. We'll be taking off 17 right today. And we'll insert. You can see it's now populated part of our flight plan into our FMC. After cargo, we're supposed to go direct to OSIGN. So put that in. Oscar, Sierra, India, November, Echo. Put that right where it says flight plan discontinuity. Now you can see it goes cargo, and then we'll hit top of climb, and then we'll hit OSIGN. And you'll see DCT, that means direct. Up here you see where it says cargo 4, that means you're on the RNAV departure, the SID, out of Louisville. We're going to scroll down until we see Kilo Mike Echo Mike. That's Memphis. We're going to select that. Select our star. And it's important with this to select first your runway. So ILS 18 left, then select your arrival star. Transition today will be rammered. If you select your star first and then you choose your runway, it'll clear out your star in your transition point. So select your runway first, then your star and transition point. Then we'll select insert. Now in this plan, you're going to have a discontinuity between OSIGN and Blues 4. That's absolutely normal when you're having a direct to route versus flying on an airway. Now, while we're here, I want to mention how you fly on airways. I'm not going to actually put it in, but I'll show you. So I'm going to select OSIGN here, and then we'd select airway. Notice it says no airways because there's no airways from OSIGN. If there was, one would pop up and you could select it there. So now we're going to clear out this flight plan discontinuity. What that does is it creates a direct route between OSIGN and Rambert on the Blues 4 arrival. So now it's direct from OSIGN to Rambert. Then you'll see a vector and then a flight plan discontinuity again. This is because you're expected to be vectored by air traffic control. Now, if you're not online, you can just as easily clear out the vector and have it go direct to Reese, which is the first initial approach fix on the ILS 18 left into Memphis. However, today we're going to leave this in because what I want to show you is how you can self-vector yourself onto an ILS like a controller would vector you on, because I am a S3 or approach/departure controller inside of VATSIM. I can show you how that looks as if a air traffic controller is giving you instructions. So we're going to leave that in for now. With the route in, next thing we can do is we can go back to the init page, go to the second page, and we're going to put in our block fuel, 0 fuel weight, and then 0 fuel weight CG. So our block fuel today is going to be 23.1. Our 0 fuel weight, we can pull that from the EFB, is 217.190. 217.2, that's the closest. You always want to go higher on the weight and lower on the fuel when you're rounding. That just puts you in a safety margin. 0 fuel weight CG is going to be 26%. to 26.0. And now we completed the second init page. Now we can go to takeoff and approach. Now in order to figure this out, we're going to go back to our EFB and select our takeoff calculator. If it'll let me. Come on now. There we go. We're going to select our runway length. It's going to automatically pull that runway length from the planned runway that you have in your flight computer. So 11,889 feet. Plenty of runway for this sucker. Runway heading 165. That is with the magnetic variation. The actual runway heading here in Louisville is 170. So that is pulling from the magnetic variation. Weight. We're looking for our gross weight. So we can go back to our weight and balance. Our gross weight is 240.374. So again, we're going to go 240. Select weight. 240. Point. What was it? 274? Was that right? I could be wrong. 240.374. That's important. 0.4. 240.4. Anti-ice off. Air conditionings can be on because, let's be honest, we're going to have plenty of runway room. You can turn this off to give your engines just a little bit more oomph. And in some situations, for a short runway, you may have to do that. So we're going to go ahead and calculate this. It's going to give our flex temp, V1, VR, and V2. So 138, 138, 165. So we're going to go back to our FMC. We'll select 138 on the V1. 138 on VR. And V2 you cannot change here. You have to change it up here on the FCP. If you remember, this is supposed to be 165. Perfect. And then we come back and you can see V2 has now been selected at 165. All right. We're going to pull flex temp 59 degrees and we're going to go up here to our engine thrust and economy calculator input portion of the panel. I'm not sure exactly what they call this, but we're going to go flex TO and we're going to put in 59 degrees Celsius. And we'll keep it there. All right, with that complete, we want to make sure that we've done a couple more items here. First, we want to make sure our altitude select is what we've been assigned by ATC. Now here in Louisville, I know because again, as a controller in Indianapolis Center, specifically I control Louisville quite a bit, our departure altitude clearance will be 5,000 feet. Speed 165, and we're going to go ahead and select our heading select to the runway heading. We're going to put in 170. Now decision height, we're going to start with a -5 decision height, and that keeps the jip whip system from balking at us. We don't want to have any positives there. We want to make sure our flight directors are on, which we can see they're already in the on. They're showing green here, and in the nav position, you don't want it in ILS or VOR, you want it in nav. That means it's going to follow the area navigation system of the aircraft versus an ILS or a VOR. All right, with that being done, we're going to go ahead and go overhead panel, and we're going to turn on our APU master switch because we're about to start our engines. And before we start our engines, we want to have our APU running, because once we disconnect from the APU, then or from the shore power or the external power, we have to have some type of power running, not just battery. Otherwise, it's going to cause all kinds of havoc in here. So we're going to turn our APU on. And in fact, we can go ahead and turn on all of our fuel pumps. And we're going to hit start. And what we're going to look for is over here, we're going to select APU. And we're going to watch our APU and make sure we're actually going to start our APU. While that's happening, I'm going to ask the ground control system go ahead and prepare for pushback and departure. That will disconnect the jetway and close up our doors as well. You can see now that the APU in percentage is starting to rise, and EGT is also starting to rise.
We are ready for pushback. Departure checks completed. Bypass pin inserted.
Okay, APU's online. We'll go overhead now. Disconnect external power. Galley shed can come on. And we'll turn on our APU bleeds. We'll need that for our startup.
Release parking brakes.
All right, we're going to release parking brake here.
Commencing push. All engines clear. Start at will.
All right, we can start at will. We're going to go overhead panel, switch ignition to alpha, and start number 2. What you'll see is arm will go to open, and then we'll watch as the N2 or engine starts rising. You can also turn on the engine gauges here if you want to watch it here as well, but this gives it just fine. At 20% of N2, we'll add fuel. All right, we've got a good start number 2. We're going to go ahead and set the parking brake, go overhead, and we'll go ahead and start number 1 now. The open selected. Watch N2 rise. Turn on engine number 1, fuel selector valve, or fuel flow valve, I should say.
Unlocking gear. Tow truck disconnected. Bypass pin removed. Left is clear. Right is clear.
All right, engine number 1 is now started. With both of the engines on and no icing conditions or heavy thunderstorms apparent, we're going to go ahead and turn off our ignition system. We'll also turn off our APU. Turn off our APU bleed. Bleeds will switch over to engines 1 and 2. And we'll go ahead and arm our speed brake. Set our slats and flaps to take off, which is going to be slaps 15. And flaps 15. You can see that indicated here. Trim, we'll go ahead and set that for takeoff. Under our weights, you'll see trim is 0.9 up, and we'll look for that right here. And looking straight down on it, we're right at 1, so we'll go 0.9. this point, you get your taxi clearance, which in this case, we're going to be going from the terminal to 17 right. And we'll taxi via Mike, Golf, Bravo. So taxi clearance has been obtained. Go and turn on our taxi lights. And we can go ahead and release our parking brake. Now before we start moving, I do want to switch over our EFIS 2 flight controls. And I want to check and make sure rudder left, rudder right, left up, left down, right up, right down, and then up and down. Flight controls are free and correct. Alright, with that being done, we're going to add a little bit of power here. Start moving. We'll turn on auto brake to max. That's in preparation for our departure. Transponder, we'll turn that to on. Mode C so they can see us. And weather radar will turn on once we get closer to the runway. We don't want to irradiate everybody if we're passing by while we're taxiing. So bear with me as I taxi to the runway. So as we turn towards the runway end, at this point we can go and turn on our weather radar. Do that, we're going to go center console, flip it to the 1 position. We're going to go ahead and turn on or activate, or say, sorry, we're going to arm, nav, and profile. Think of this like this is lateral navigation, this is vertical navigation. Go ahead and turn on our landing lights, wing lights, turn off lights. Beacons should have already been turned on, and strobes to auto. Beacon should be turned on once you start your engine, or right before you start your engine. Alright, we've been given clearance to take off. Go ahead and do our takeoff config test. No warnings or indicators. We're good for that. We're going to line up. Our brakes, our lights are already set. Ignition's not required at this point because, again, no icing conditions, no heavy weather. Packs will keep on as we calculated. Now, if you calculate with packs off on a short runway, make sure you turn those off. And TCAS can be turned to TARA. It's going to be the last thing here, right there. Now we're going to increase our throttles. You'll see about 40% on N1. Clock starts. There's 40%. Toga activated. You'll see thrust, SRS heading mode with profile climb and nav as armed. We use our rudders to keep us centered. There's 80 knots. Release the forward nose pressure. There's 120. B1, rotate. Pull back. There's 5 degrees. There's 10 degrees. We're off the ground. Now we'll pitch for the green arc, the green cross. Positive rate gear coming up. That's just an outer marker indicator. That's not a warning. Now 1,000 feet above the ground, we can go ahead and turn on the autopilot, which will be autopilot number 1. Now we can go ahead and pull up our flaps because we passed the F on the speed taker tape. Once we hit S, that means we can pull up the slats as well. There's passing S, we'll pull up the slats as well. Now we're going to say we got cleared up to our cruise altitude of 34,000 feet. In reality, here at Louisville, if you're on VATSIM, you'll be cleared to 10,000 initially, and then handed over to Center, who will clear you up to your final cruising altitude, or whatever altitude they need you to fly at for traffic or safety reasons. All right, there's 34,000 set. Go ahead and disarm the spoilers. If you had your packs off, you can turn them on now. Anti-ice as required. What we look here is TAT. If it's 10 degrees Celsius or below, down to I think negative 10 degrees Celsius, invisible moisture, you'll want anti-ice turned on. However, before turning on your engine anti-ice, you want to make sure you turn on your ignition to continuous relight if you do have to turn on your engine anti-ice. All right, there's 10 degrees Celsius. We are in visible moisture, so I am going to turn on my ignition to continuous relight. And then engines anti-ice on. And we're breaking out of the clouds now. I'm not going to worry about the wing anti-ice just yet. Comes 10,000 feet. That means landing lights are coming off. Wing lights can also come off. Turn-off lights can come off. Nose wheels can come off as well. And we can go and release the passengers if we're not expecting any turbulence, which we're not. Wing anti-ice, I've turned it on now. Supply on in auto mode. Just because we're going to be hitting this next cloud layer here in a second. So normally you'll have a different type of altimeter. It could be 2983 or 3017. It could be all kinds of over the place. Now, because I'm preset weather, we're going to be 2992 the entire time. But I'm still going to hit the standard button. That way we're going through the correct procedures so you can see those happening. We won't hit that until 18,000 feet here in the United States. If you're flying overseas or South America, Europe, Asia, anything like that, you're going to have different policies and procedures for when you actually switch over to standard temperature or standard barometric pressure, not temperature. I'm going to go ahead and change my heading selector now to an on-course heading, or roughly to where we are on course right now. That way, if for some reason I needed to fly present heading versus continuing to fly our lateral navigation using area navigation, I would be able to do that. All right, we're still 5 degrees Celsius, and we're now going into visible moisture again, so we're going to keep the anti-engine and wing anti-ice on. Approaching 18,000 feet. Go and switch this over to standard on both the pilot and the co-pilot side. You have your alternate altimeter. Say that 10 times fast. Alternate altimeter. You'll want to switch that also to standard barometric pressure, which would be 2992 here in the United States. or you could use 10.13 if you're over in Europe or Asia or some other country. So at this point, all you're going to be doing is monitoring the aircraft, making sure fuel flow is correct, fuel on board is correct at your waypoints, and of course, air traffic control, any type of deviations you might have to do, making sure your anti-ice is on when you're in icing conditions, anything like that. At this point, I am going to step away, and I'll see you guys once we get up to cruise. Okay, we're approaching our top of climb. Now, if you notice on the navigation display or multifunction display, you'll notice that this white arrow may appear. This white arrow is your estimated top of descent point. Now, in general, you want to plan your descent roughly 80 nautical miles or so out from your estimated top of descent. That way you have everything in your flight computer and you're not missing anything. You've checked everything. You've got frequencies programmed, everything, so that later you won't be overwhelmed with a lot of tasks to do in a very short period of time, which can happen very quickly, especially when you get into the approach phase of your flight. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and start our pre-descent and arrival planning, because I want to get enough time for me to talk you guys through it and how that all is going to work. So first thing you want to do, you want to obtain the weather at the destination airport. Now, I happen to know what it is. Now, we're going to be getting a slight crosswind of about 6 knots. Altimeter is going to be 29902, or overcast around 4,000 feet or so. We're going to be flying the ILS, not Category 2 or 3, just Category 1. Into the airport. Our landing elevation needs to be set. Now, we've already set that to close to the destination airport field elevation, which I think was like 276 or something like that. But we're going to be flying, we're going to put that about 300 there. Okay. Once that's done, you want to go ahead and you can check your fuel, make sure you have enough fuel on board. I know I have plenty. We're going to start programming our FMS. To do that, we're going to go like normal down to our FMS, and we're going to put in some information. The other thing we're going to put in here is our MDA. What is MDA? MDA is your minimum descent altitude, which means you do not descend below this altitude on this approach. So we're going to put 501, which is our MDA here with the ILS. 501's entered. That's all we got to do with the takeoff and approach modes. Now, if you're flying a Category 2 or 3, you'll want to put in your decision height here. We're going to keep -5 because we don't have a decision height with a Category 1 ILS. Now, our ILS into Memphis, which is 18 left, that's what we're anticipating. Our ILS frequency is going to be 111.15 with a course of 180. All right, 180 set. Now here's where it gets a little tricky with your approaches. First of all, I'm going to turn on constraints so I can see my constraints that are coming up. So your approaches are going to have different initial approach fixes, intermediate fixes, and then your final approach fixes. Here we have an initial approach fix, or initial fix of Reese, and then we have a intermediate fix of Ronnie, which is also the point which we should be intercepted with the glide slope. Now each one of these has a altitude. Reese has 3,000, Ronnie has 2,000. Now something with this particular aircraft, it is using, as far as I'm aware, Microsoft Flight Simulator's default autopilot, which can be a little finicky and honestly not the best. So what can we do to make sure we're flying a proper approach? and doing it the best we can without looking like a fool or violating these restrictions. Now, first off, we're going to adjust our altitude because as we come up to our top of descent, we want to be able to make sure we're descending according to the profile that the aircraft has calculated. We're going to put in an altitude initially of 10,000 feet. Now, you may be asking, why are you putting in 10,000 feet? I'm putting in 10,000 feet to make sure we don't accidentally cross 10,000 feet at a too fast at greater than 250 knots. Later, as we get closer and I make sure that we're not going to violate that restriction, we're going to adjust that altitude down to 0. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking, what? Why are you putting it down to 0? Well, we're not actually going to fly to 0, and I'll show you how we're not going to fly to 0, but we're not going to use altitude hold mode during this approach phase. The reason why we're not, because it will override your glide slope capture. Listen to that again. Your altitude selector hold mode will override your glide slope capture. So for example, if we put in 2,000 feet and we hit 2,000 feet before we intercept the glide slope arm will disappear and it will not capture the glide slope at all. So we don't want that to happen. We want to capture the glide slope. So we're going to set it to 0 after we hit 10,000 feet. Now with that, we're going to be descending on the profile setting. This means the aircraft's going to calculate by itself its descent. We are also going to be using vertical speed because, again, what if you're going to be given a heading, which is going to take you off your normal course, not, flying your specific profile, and like we mentioned in the very beginning with our flight plan, how we are going to act like this vector is there and it's real, because in VATSIM, you will be vectored. It's going to happen. So you need to know how to deal with this without having to use altitude hold mode. Now, you can use altitude hold mode initially and then switch over to vertical speed. Just make sure that your altitude selector is going to be all the way down to 0. So it's a little complicated. I know it may seem complicated, but you'll see what I'm talking about as we get closer. Now, we're approximately about 50 nautical miles now from top of descent. We'll continue with our descent planning and approach brief and arrival brief as well. So we're going to go down to our flight plan real fast, and we're going to make sure everything here is all good to go. So Blues 4 is our arrival. So Blues 4, we're looking at, find the first one here. Confirm rammed. So first one we're going to be hitting is axle, which is over 204, over 24. That is correct, matching correctly. And then we're going to be hitting speaker, which is flight level 14,000 to flight level 230. And then continuing down, we'll hit Blues at 14,000 feet. And then Copen at 10,000 feet. And then we'll be vectored off of Copen onto the ILS 18 left. So that looks correct. Now for our approach brief, we're going to be flying the ILS 18 left approach. We've already inputted the localizer, 111.15, approach course of 180. Glide slope intercept point should be Ronnie at 2,000 feet. Our decision, our minimum descent altitude or decision altitude is going to be 501 feet barometric, 200 feet radar if we were doing the category 2 or 3. Missed approach, we're going to climb to 900 feet, then we'll make a left-hand climbing turn to 5,000 outbound on the Memphis VOR 151 radial to the Keys interception, about 10.4 nautical miles from Memphis, and hold. Continue to climb and hold to 5,000 feet. Now, why is that important? Well, if we do have to go around, obviously it's important to know that. But it's also important to know that because 5,000 feet is going to be another number that we're going to be inputting into our altitude selector after we have intercepted our glide slope. All right, that's pretty much all we got to do now before our descent. So we'll wait until our descent, and then I'll show you guys how to do that as well. Alrighty, as we approach our top of descent, what we're going to do is we're going to select our descent mode. Simply pull the knob or the down looking arrow, and you'll see where it says P.DES. What that means is profile descent. So once it hits this point, or really close to this point, it'll start its descent down according to what is calculated to be the best profile. All you have to do at this point is monitor the descent, and then at about 18,000 feet, switch over from standard to the local barometric pressure. Turn on your seatbelt lights before 10,000 feet, exterior lights on, and make sure the aircraft is slowed down to 250 knots. Now, what I'm going to do here is we're going to skip all the way down to 18,000 feet, and then we'll take it from there all the way to the airport. All right, we're approaching 18,000 feet, which means it's time to switch over our altimeters from standard to a set setting. So we're going to push the button in, which is the up arrow. You'll see 29.2, and same for the other one. We're going to keep it 29.92, which happens to be the same as standard pressure, but you know, we're going through the motions like I said we would. We'll continue monitoring the aircraft as it descends, and we'll pick you back up at about just before 10,000 feet. All right, we're approaching 11,000 feet now, focused on hitting about 10,000 feet here shortly. But first we need to go overhead panel here, and we're going to go ahead and turn on some lights. So we're going to turn on our landing lights to on. We're going to turn on our runway lights, our runway turn-off lights, I should say. If I can get them to select, there we go, to on as well. Wing lights coming on as well. Nose, we'll switch to taxi, and seatbelt signs come on. Let's check what our outside temperature is. Still 6 degrees, 5 degrees Celsius, so we're still within that danger area of icing. We're going to keep our engine and wing anti-ice on for now, because we do have this visible moisture, even though we're flying in between them right now. Keep them on. All right, so I already talked about not wanting to use altitude select. So you'll notice that we've hit our profile altitude of 10,000 feet, and our altitude selector is still 10,000 here as well. But we can go ahead and change that. You also see a message, discontinuity ahead. We've expected that. Now you could go direct to Reese if you wanted to, but in most situations you're going to be vectored, right? So we're going to say now that they're going to vector us to 250. So we'll select heading select 250. And our altitude, let's say they say descend to maintain 5,000 feet for now. So we'll select altitude to 5,000. Now on its own, profile is going to give you some type of descent. The problem with profile is that you may or may not descend at the appropriate level you need to in order to reach 3,000 feet at Reese, or above 3,000 feet at Reese. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to vertical speed. Turn on vertical speed, and we're going to descend at 1,000 feet per minute and see where that puts us on our descent path. I'm going to make this disappear for a second so we can see this better. So you can see right now we're going to be 5,000 feet at this arch. Now that's above 3,000 feet, but we probably want to be 5,000 before then. So we'll go ahead and descend, let's say at about 1,600 feet per minute. That looks a lot more doable because eventually we're going to have to hit 3,000 feet. There's a little acronym we use in the virtual air traffic control realm called PTAC, which I think is also used in real world as well. I've done instrument training, not got my instrument ticket yet, but PTAC is used there too, which is position, turn, altitude, and clearance. What that means is the ATC is going to tell you your position, the turn they want you to make, the altitude, and what type of approach they're clearing you onto. So in this case, it'd be an ILS. So we're going to be a certain number of miles from our gate of the approach, which in most cases would be Reese or Roni in some cases. And then we'd be giving an altitude to maintain until established in the localizer. And then, a turn, which in this case needs to be within 30 degrees of the final approach course, which is 180. So we're probably going to get a turn, left-hand turn to 210. And then maintain an altitude until established in the localizer. That could be 3,000 or 2,000, whatever gate they're going to want to push you through. I'm using the word gate here, and if you're an air traffic controller or your virtual air traffic controller, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so we're going to continue descending to 5,000 feet for now. And we're currently at 230 knots, which was our last speed restriction. We're above 10 degrees Celsius now, so we can go ahead and turn off our engine anti-ice and our wing anti-ice. Ignition mode can go back to the off position. As we approach 5,000 feet, let's say they give us another clearance, just to maintain 3,000. So we'll descend to maintain 3,000, which should be expected considering that's the first waypoint Reese, right? We don't need to be below 3,000 feet. And at this point, you can see again the arch is showing us we're going to be at 3,000 feet way before Reese, which again will initiate that altitude hold mode that I was talking about that can cause a problem. And we'll show you how to overcome that here shortly. We do want to go ahead, though, as we are approaching at 10 nautical miles out from your initial approach fix, we do want to go ahead and decrease our speed to our slat speed. That is going to be that green dot indicated on your ticker tape. We're going to decrease our selected speed down to that, and then we'll drop our slats initially, and then once we're localizer captured, we'll go ahead and start dropping our flaps and get us set up for that final approach. All right, now we can see speed and altitude has been selected. We're also still on heading select. Now, if you see this on your final approach, this is where the problem can start arising with your ILS capture in this particular aircraft. Not all aircraft are like this. In fact, I think it's just a restriction of the default Asobo autopilot that they've used in this aircraft. I could be wrong, but I did a lot of troubleshooting on this to figure out exactly how this is supposed to work. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and reduce our speed to that slat speed I talked about. It's going to be 204. Now we're going to say they give us our PTAC. Delta 910, you're 7 miles from Reese, turn left heading 210, maintain 2,000 until established in localizer, cleared ILS from a 18 left approach. So we'll go, okay, heading 210. And we're going to go down to 2,000. There's 210, there's 2,000. And then we'll go vertical speed again. We're going to go down to 1,000 feet per minute. You can actually see the airport. All right, we're at 204. We're going to go and drop slats now to 15. With slats going down to 15, we can go ahead and reduce our speed now again to that S speed. Now you'll see that this little diamond appeared. At this point in time, we want to switch over from nav to ILS, and we can see both the localizer and the glide slope. Oh, here comes the trick, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so now we're at approaching 2,000 feet. We haven't been getting over the tower. We haven't gotten our clearance to land yet. All right, there's 2,000 feet. Now, what we want to do at this point is we want to initiate our land. Once we're straight and level here, 2,000, we're going to click land. You'll see glide slope and localizer are armed. Now, altitude hold is currently at 2,000. We're going to change that to 0 once the localizer is captured. I know that sounds crazy, but just trust me. We're going to switch that to 0 once the localizer is captured. And we're going to keep it 0 until the glide slope is captured. A lot of things are going to happen here all at once. You'll see what I'm saying. Just listen to my call-outs. Localizer captured, flaps going 15, altitude going down to 0. Going overhead, been cleared to land, takeoff lights going on. Arming speed brakes armed. Takeoff going, final approach armed. Speed reducing. Flap speed. 30-degree flaps coming in. Gear coming down. Flaps lead selected. Glide slip captured. Now that we have glide slip captured, we can crank this sucker altitude up to 5,000. All right, 5,000 set. That's our go-around altitude. And final notch flaps coming in. Or slats coming in. And flaps coming in. All right. All right, final approach. Flaps set, speed set, gear down, nose lights, takeoff, armed, spoilers. And we've got the runway in sight. 1,000 above. Flight autopilot off. I've got the aircraft. Press idle.
10, 5.
Hold it up about 3 to 5 degrees. Just let her come down. We're down. Reverses out. Nose down. Reversers are out. And manual braking. All right, reversers in. And we're going to taxi off the runway. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how you fly the Airbus A310 by iniBuilds and Asobo. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun to learn all about this aircraft. It is something special for sure. If you've never flown the aircraft, yeah, you should definitely check it out. It's a lot of fun to fly once you understand it. I will say it's a little bit to get used to, for sure. But once you understand it, it's a lot of fun. So go ahead and taxi this aircraft to the hangar, or correction, to the terminal, and we'll put it up for the day. But again, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe. If you want to find out more information about flying on VATSIM or anything of that nature, I do have an online course that you can take. It's over at upinthesky.teachable.com. You can check the free trial out first to see if it's anything you're interested in. And after that, I'd appreciate it if you'd purchase it. It's pretty cheap. It's only $5. So again, thanks for flying with me today. If you got any questions, drop them in the comments down below. Thanks, and I'll see you all next time up in the sky.